Continuing the idea of transcendentalism as a practical experience, remember that it takes spiritual vision to make the spiritual life practical. There were 3 Hebrews placed in the fiery furnace, and we are told that they came out without even the smell of smoke upon them. But it is said that some saw a 4th man walking with them through the furnace. Jesus was crucified and sealed in a tomb. Yet those of spiritual vision beheld him later walking the earth. Saul of Tarsus was a persecutor of the Christians, a man well learned in Hebrew lore. Yet, on his way to Damascus to persecute more Christians, he had the experience of beholding the Christ, of actually hearing the voice. That was a transcendental experience, and you know how practical it was made. It made him a disciple of the Christian teaching. It made him a healer, a teacher, a preacher, a founder of churches, places of worship. Yes, it had a very practical effect upon his life. But that spiritual vision must be there, and it is for this reason. Human experience and human wisdom places its dependence on things and persons out here. It has confidence when it has enough dollar bills. It has confidence when the heart is beating regularly, and the liver and the lungs and the rest of the human organs and functions are operating perfectly. It has perfect confidence when everything in this outer world appears present in harmonious activity and abundant measure. It gets into trouble the minute something happens in that outer universe, and the number of dollars disappear, or the organs or functions no longer operate harmoniously. When difficulty comes in human relationships, then comes the difficulty, because the human mind has no way out except to look for more people or more dollars or more functions or more organs, and too often fails in finding the solution. In your spiritual life, your dependence is not on persons and things in the outer world. Now, this is not a negation. This is not a negating of anything or of anybody. It is not turning away from the practicality of dollars, nor the loveliness of friendships. This is a matter of dependence, faith. And your spiritual student has come, well, the experience of Saul of Tarsus that made him St. Paul was an experience of realizing that this so-called intangible that none of the rest of the world saw or heard became the guiding light and star of his outer experience. It was that which provided even the practical things of money. You know, it's a strange thing that in going from city to city and country to country, founding these different churches, that even after they were founded, many of the churches couldn't finance themselves, and after a short while, and some a longer while, were in financial difficulties, and they had to call back on Brother Paul again. And it was Paul who went out and refinanced them, and always provided the additional funds. Oh yes, this Paul, the man of spirit, the preacher, that which the world today would call impractical, he was enabled to provide funds for the churches when the very practical boards of directors and boards of trustees weren't able to do it. It reminds me something of, I've had a great deal of experience in that line, and would take too much time to tell about it, but this is an interesting one, that during the lifetime of Mary Baker Eddy, in whatever she had to finance for the Christian Science movement, she did it without any human means. She used no human means to raise her millions of dollars for the building of the edifices and so forth. As a matter of fact, when she bought the first piece of property and presented it to her students for the erection of a church, they had to raise the money for the church, and they came to her and told her that they were going to have a church bazaar. She was rather shocked at that, and said, "Why, we don't use methods like that for financing. We go to God." "Oh yes, we're going to God, but we're going to have a church bazaar." But she said the two don't go together. Human financing and spiritual financing are two different things, but she couldn't convince them of it. And when she saw that, she said, "Well, if you must do it that way now, suffer it to be so now, go ahead and have your bazaar." And they did. They had a very successful one for 3 whole days, and it was quite a big affair, and they raised $10,000. And so they went to her in high glee to show how they were right. They had had their bazaar, and they had $10,000 to prove it. But they only had it for 24 hours because the treasurer eloped with it, and he's never been found since. And so in the last analysis, they had to turn to the Spirit, and that church was financed without any further human footsteps. However, as time went on and Mrs. Eddy required millions, she had to use the same method with which she had begun, not turning to human methods, but to prayer. She did announce when they needed $4.5 million to build a church, $5 million, that the church was to be built and would cost $5 million, and the $5 million came in. The church was entirely paid for before it was open to the public, and without any advertising campaigns or anything of that kind. And later, when the new publishing house was built, the directors of the mother church thought they were going to finance the same way, and they failed. They weren't able to bring through that demonstration and had to use a little human footstep to help their prayers. Now then, it is true that in the world of the Spirit, you can do all your financing without recourse to human means. You never have to ask anybody for money. You never have to tell anyone your needs. You need only get quiet within your own being in the realization of all these promises of Isaiah, of the Master, the realization of this, that the Spirit of truth in you is the substance of what is to appear outwardly as these dollars or seats in the airplane or whatever the need may be. So in making your transition from material sense, which says that you must have dollars or that you must use human means of acquiring them, or that places a dependence in a pill or a plaster or any material application, in making your transition, you come to that place of recognition of the substance of all form appearing outwardly as the necessary form. Now, remember this. It is entirely practical to turn within to the source of that which appears without. Faith is the substance of things hoped for. The world that appears is not made of anything that appears, but of that which is invisible. The real substance of all form is invisible. When you place a seed in the ground, there is a life force that acts upon it, and that life force is invisible, but that life force invisibly acting upon the seed and the soil later appears as blossoms, flowers, fruit. The visible is the result of an invisible presence, power, force. In agriculture, in horticulture, we call it nature, but by whatever name you call it, it's God. It is an invisible, infinite force and power, which also is a law. That is why when you plant the seeds of roses, you only get roses. When you plant pineapple, you get pineapple, because there is a law operating, a law of like begetting like. That law is invisible. Even its action is invisible, but the result of the action becomes visible and later becomes tangible as fruit, blossoms, flowers, trees. So it is. There is within us an invisible law in operation. You witness the result of it here in this room. It is a law of attraction in this case that has drawn us together without human means. No advertising, no seeking on your part or mine, and yet automatically and quickly we're drawn together. What brought us together? A law of attraction, a law of like begetting like, a law of love, a law of truth. Something brought us together in this oneness, in this unity of interest. And it wasn't human planning, and it wasn't human scheming, and it wasn't human advertising. It was a law at work in the withinness of us, and it became tangible outwardly as this class. So it is. You can apply this to your business, to your home, to your marketing, to your shopping, to your financing. Only realize that all outer effects are the products of an inner spirit, an inner law. Only remember that all that comes into your outer experience you attract to yourself by a law. When you attract the evil, it is, of course, because you have opened yourself negatively instead of positively. In other words, if you sit back in the attitude that anything can happen to me and a lot of things are apt to, of course you are opening yourself to a negative application of a spiritual law. When, on the other hand, you recognize the nature of I and realize that the very first chapter of Genesis gives you dominion, God-given dominion over all that is, then you have positive laws at work in your experience. Now, as you realize this, now, I'll tell you, you must open your eyes and your ears, your inner eyes and your inner ears to understand me. Infinite good is already established within your own consciousness. And you are not going to add good to yourself. You're going to learn through practice to let your good flow out from within your own being. God is this law operating in and as your own consciousness, and because God is infinite, your consciousness is infinite, therefore your consciousness is all-inclusive, and it includes now the substance of everything necessary to your experience unto eternity if you live 7 billion years, which you will. All that is necessary for your unfoldment is at this very moment. The substance of it is embodied within you. Now, you can understand this if I say that if you want to build a bridge, the substance of that idea is already within you, and all you are called on to do is to bring it forth and put it on paper. It's there, in its fullness, in its completeness. Every idea necessary for the completion of that bridge, or a piece of music, or a novel, or a design for a house, it's all there within your own being. And as you learn to develop that listening ear, that inner vision, it will pour itself out on paper for you. Not only that, if it must be financed, it will pour itself out as money to finance it. In other words, the substance of everything necessary to your experience is already within your own being and ready to appear in natural unfoldment as it becomes necessary to you. The completeness and perfection of your life is already established within you as essence or substance, and it appears outwardly as form. Your part of the bargain is to learn to sit back, to have your moments of meditation. If you are new or young students of the Infinite Way, you may not yet have come to see what many of our students have, that 10 times a day is not too many. Not too many periods to set aside for meditation. 10 and 12 of them, awaking in the middle of the night for more of them. Why? Because all that meditation is a relaxing in the awareness that within me is the fulfillment of life. And in the recognition of that, the flow begins. The Master says, I am come that ye might be fulfilled. I say I. I am come. That I within you is come that you might be fulfilled. That I, its function there, its purpose there, that is the Christ of God, that I, the Son of God, the child of God, the offspring of God, and its function there is that you might be fulfilled. Fulfill yourself as parents, fulfill yourself as homekeepers, fulfill yourself as children of God, fulfill yourself in harmonious and abundant, progressive, good experience. I am there for that purpose. That I is within you. And your meditation is a relaxing and a realization that the invisible substance of my being, the invisible consciousness, the invisible soul of me is the essence of all form. It is my protector, my Christ, my Savior. It is protection in my travel, protection in my daily experience. It is a law of harmonious relationships. Isaiah tells us, cease ye from man, whose breath is in his nostrils, for wherein is he to be accounted of? And then we're told, put not your faith in princes. And the psalmist says that when your mother and your father desert you, forsake you, I will be with you. You see, there is no such thing as a human circumstance that can take place in your experience that will be of any permanent destruction or harm or inconvenience to you, if only you will recognize that your dependence isn't on father or mother or child or on husband or wife. It's on this infinite, invisible. And you learn something too. You learn how beautiful life can be when you have come to the point of reliance on that infinite, invisible. You know, most of the discords in this world come from the fact that we believe we need something of each other, and each one is afraid that the other's going to get it away from him. Yes, it's a complete fear that we're not going to get our just dues or our just deserts. Sometimes we're afraid that we aren't going to get them. But it's always a fear of what it may be expected of us that's too much, or what should be coming to us that's too little. Whereas, can you imagine the great joy there is in meeting a group of people who do not want anything of each other? Now that's what happens in this experience. You go through life in the realization that you can be friends with anybody and everybody in the world because they haven't got anything that you need or want. That anything at all that you require that is necessary is a matter of unfoldment to you from within your own being. And you know that makes sharing a double delight. It's a marvelous thing to share with people who don't expect it of us. No, the transcendentalism comes in the turning away from a dependence, not a negating, a dependence on the person, place, and thing, and coming to that place of Christ realization which knows I am come that you might be fulfilled. If you go through the waters, you will not drown. Whatever may befall you, I am in the midst of you, I, as a law of fulfillment, as a law of supply, as a law of grace. And be assured of this, it is not by might, nor by power, but by divine grace that this good unfolds to you. The moment you give up the mental and physical struggle for the things of life, they begin to unfold in their naturalness without effort. It is really a life by grace, in which you can demonstrate that passage that is the foundational point of the entire message of the infinite way, Luke 12:22 to 32. Take no thought for your life, what you shall eat, or what you shall drink, or wherewithal you shall be clothed. Your heavenly Father knoweth that you have need of these things, and it is his good pleasure to give you the kingdom. Give, gift, present, present. Ah yes, the nations of the world struggle after those things. Fight for them, war for them, and even pray for them. It is necessary. Your heavenly Father knoweth that you have need of these things, and it is his good pleasure to give you the kingdom. And so, the life of the Spirit is a life by grace, a relaxing into the realization that the essence or substance of all of your good is already within you and unfolding in an orderly, progressive, abundant fashion into your experience. Let us meditate on that a while. I have done more than tell you about the Christ and its activities. I have brought the Christ alive, active in your consciousness. It will be impossible for you ever to avoid the experience of the fruitage of the Christ. In what measure will depend upon you. In some measure, there is no way for you to avoid it. The Christ is active as the presence of God, the Son of God, in your consciousness. The degree or amount of fruitage that you experience rests with you individually, because there lies the responsibility with you of acceptance. In other words, the Christ operates freely in proportion as we relax our personal effort. Probably I could illustrate that by saying that if I wanted to write a book, a play, or a piece of music, that I could best bring the activity of the Christ into my experience first by relaxing if necessary, consciously realizing for a few moments that the substance of this that I'm desiring is already within my own being, that it is mine as a gift of God, and being very still, very quiet, and very peaceful, in the assurance that this idea, this word, will become flesh, become tangible in my experience. And as I relax all effort then, become perfectly still, perfectly quiet, all of a sudden this new idea bursts upon me, dawns upon me, and the new idea unfolds. New plot for a story, new piece of music, a new poem, new design for a home, whatever it may be, it will come by grace. Now the activity of this Christ is with you and is available to you in proportion to your experience in meditating, in becoming quiet, in becoming receptive, in letting it function. You will remember this: our good is not earned by the sweat of our brow. It is not to be labored for. It is to come to us gently, peaceably, by grace. Doesn't mean that we won't work hard. Oh, indeed, we will work harder than we ever have in our lives before, because we'll be given so much more work to do. But we will not be struggling for success, or battling for it, or fighting the elements for it, or fighting for ideas. We won't even be fighting or struggling for partners, or for financing, or for recognition or reward. All that will be done for us in proportion as we learn to relax in the Spirit. There is something that will carry us through every experience, and that something now is alive, alert, awakened in your experience. Rest more, relax more, realize more and more that it is the invisible that appears visibly. That what appears as outward form is but the result of your own inner grace. That the inner grace given to you is appearing every moment, every day, invisible and tangible form necessary to your abundant experience. All is well. I will never leave you nor forsake you. Son, all that I have is thine. Rest a little while. So that we do not accept at any time the belief that we have the right to outline to God, to this Spirit within, what the nature of our demonstration is to be. In our meditation, be sure always that we do take the attitude of realizing that God is infinite intelligence and that God knows the nature of the demonstration. Not that we are outlining it, but that we are receptive to whatever form the demonstration is to be. I remember in the last year of my business experience that my business had all of a sudden become very bad, and every day it got worse. And I was going to practitioners and having treatments for better business, by which I meant, of course, more orders and more profits. But the more these practitioners worked for me, the worse my business got, until finally there wasn't any. And 3 times in 1 week I was told, don't you know that you have no right to be in business, you should be in the practice. Oh, I never dreamed of that. I never dreamed that that was to be my life. But I did, after the 3rd time, take the suggestion and opened an office as practitioner, and all of a sudden all these treatments and prayers began to bear fruit, but not in business, but in patience and expressions of gratitude and so forth and so on. The situation was met, but not in the way that I had thought that it must be. And so it is very often we are inclined to outline just what our demonstration should be, when it is wisest to take the attitude always of receptivity and letting the Spirit inform us, letting the Spirit direct us in the way in which we should go. Then, if we follow that way, we will find our footsteps prospered from every standpoint and from every angle. It is when we go contrary to the activity of the Spirit, the leading of the Spirit, that we find human obstacles. There is a spirit in man that has been touched in you. That spirit has touched you. Yes. You will never be alone. Thank you. Thank you. Let me tell you just a little bit about love. There is no room in spiritual living for selfishness. There is no such thing as utilizing a law of God or the presence of God selfishly. And love becomes one of the great attributes, one of the great activities in our experience. But that we may be wisely led in the ways of love, let me share this with you. You are expressing your love in proportion as you are releasing the world of men and women from bondage in any form. When you release them into the kingdom of God, when you hold an individual responsible for their sins, you hold them in bondage. But when you loose them and let them go in forgiveness, if necessary even in the realization that they know not what they're doing, you are fulfilling love. There are those in your experience, humanly, who owe you an obligation, and you express your love in your releasing them from that obligation. Or, let us say, in our married experiences, that we think of a husband as having this obligation to his wife, or a wife having that obligation to a husband. But if we will release them and give them their freedom in the sense of, you owe me no obligation, our relationship is a mutual one of joy in the spirit, or joy in our relationship. And there is no obligation on the part of either of us except to love each other. And the fulfilling of the manner of that love will take care of itself. In the same way that we look to partners and feel that they have obligations to us spiritually, inwardly, not necessarily outwardly in conversation, but inwardly release them from obligation also in the sense of mutuality. That we are a partnership, a mutual partnership in intelligence and in love, and the fulfillment is not from me to you or you to me, but from God to both of us. If I see God as the support of my household, I hold nobody in a bond of obligation except God. Humanly, we have been accepting the belief that our government officials owe us an obligation. They owe us no obligation. Our good is to come from God, not from government officials. In every so-called human relationship, loose him and let him go. In other words, inwardly release the individuals of their human obligations in order that you may let God flow through and fulfill all obligations in your experience. We have an illustration of that in the writings of the man who came to me in the early part of the Depression, telling me that another man owed him an obligation, and if he could collect it, it would be enough to keep him throughout the Depression. and wanted me to do some metaphysical work that would help him collect this debt. And of course I told him that was not my understanding of spiritual law. I understood God to be the source of supply, not yesterday's manna. And I also accepted the teaching that our trespasses are forgiven in proportion as we forgive others. And I said, my idea of how you should meet this depression is not by trying to collect the debt, but by forgiving your debtor. And of course you realize that that is a transcendental and very spiritual approach to what might seem to be a very practical need. But the man saw the viewpoint and agreed to forgive the man the debt. Not necessarily wipe it out, but wipe it out of his thought, leaving it with the man to pay it when and as he could, and not looking to that man or that sum of money for his supply, but looking to God for daily manna, for manna to fall day by day, not necessarily use that which was stored up yesterday. And as you will see in the writings, the demonstration was beautifully, abundantly met. All needs were instantly met, and within 1 year that man resumed his rightful place as a very, very wealthy and successful man. But the mode of spiritual activity was forgiveness. Loose him, let him go. And so I say to you, there are those who are under obligation to you in one way or another for something. Loose him and let him go. Accept the principle that your good is the gift of God by grace, and that the substance of your good is already intact, infinite, and complete within your own being, and will unfold from within you. It may still come through some other person, through some normal business transaction or marital relationship. That's true. But you are not looking for it in that direction. You are not outlining it, nor are you holding someone in bondage to it. You are looking to the Father within, who knoweth your need and whose good pleasure it is to provide it. Loose him and let him go. Release the world of men and women from bondage, from obligation, so that you may find your oneness and completeness and wholeness in and through your God relationship, and each one then may find their self-completeness and perfection. Thank you, thank you, thank you.